The paradigm-shifting comments in recent days by US President Donald Trump have really shaken the foundations of how the 16-month-old war that Hamas launched on October 7 have been perceived, not only in Washington, but among all regional parties in the Middle East. And how will it affect Israelis, Gazans, and the return of the hostages? Let's unpack. Trump has inadvertently intensified the rift between two camps in Israel. On one hand, there are those who want Israel to give Hamas any concession necessary in the hope of bringing the hostages home as soon as possible. On the other hand, there are those who are afraid that Hamas has no intention of releasing all the hostages and is using the deals to rebuild its capabilities and set the stage for another October 7 in a few years' time. But what has happened? Well, events have moved quickly this week. Last Saturday saw the release of 3 Israeli hostages, Eli Sharabi, Or Levi, and Ohad Ben Ami, after 491 days in Hamas captivity. With the hostages appearing pale, frail, and emaciated, Hamas's grotesque cruelty was on full show in its carefully orchestrated propaganda-laced release event. The scene was especially heart-wrenching as Eli Sharabi, filled with hope, spoke of reuniting with his wife and 2 daughters, unaware that they had been mercilessly killed by Hamas terrorists on October 7. Sadistically, the crowd before him mocked and jeered at his forlorn anticipation. The harrowing state of Eli, Or, and Ohad, along with the fragments of their ordeals revealed shortly afterward, recalled the depths of Jewish suffering over history. These scenes, along with Hamas's subsequent announcement that it would not release more hostages on the next scheduled handover, Saturday, February 15, was met with a strong reaction by President Trump. He scrapped former President Biden's own 2-stage hostage release blueprint for an ultimatum. Israel should ensure Hamas releases all hostages by noon this Saturday, or let all hell break loose. Remember, Trump considers himself a master negotiator who doesn't like to be strong-armed. He sees Hamas as bullies, who by definition are weak, sick people and must be stood up to. On Wednesday, this created a very confused picture at the Knesset, Israeli parliament, with officials and even Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu himself unsure of the road forward. Was it to get Hamas back on track for Saturday's scheduled hostage for prisoner swap, or indeed adopt Trump's more aggressive, some would say reckless, ultimatum? You see, rarely does a US president outflank Israel's internal political discourse from the right, but Trump managed to put Netanyahu in the awkward position of appearing less assertive against Hamas than the US. Although it must be said, naturally, Trump has far less at stake. Israeli commentators were themselves divided as to what extent Trump had thought through this action. Meanwhile, Jordan's King Abdullah was in Washington, grappling with another ultimatum from Trump, that neighbouring Middle Eastern countries should absorb Gaza's Palestinian population to facilitate the clearing of unexploded bombs and other terror infrastructure, and the safe and orderly redevelopment of the Strip. Jordan, like Egypt, whose leader President al-Sisi is expected in Washington shortly, has clung to the Arab mantra that Gazans must never be relocated outside the Strip, even temporarily, even during wartime. Following the meeting, King Abdullah showed welcome signs of flexibility after 16 months of non-action by offering to take in 2,000 sick Gazan children as a gesture. With that said, the practicality of implementing Trump's other ideas is generally considered to be low, since it would require the complete destruction of Hamas as a prerequisite. But for now, all attention is focused on this Saturday and its implications for the remaining hostages. Meanwhile, in a desperate race against time, the hostage families continue to plea, pray, and press for an urgent homecoming in either scenario.